What's up, guys? Welcome to another edition of the UFC Quick Picks here on the Mayo Media Network. We have UFC 305 this weekend in Perth, Western Australia, with Dricus du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya in the main event. Should be a really fun card. As usual, I'm here to give you my favorite cash game play, tournament play, salary play, and a matchup I like on the DraftKings slate as well. Before I get into it, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment below. Tell me who is going to win the main event. It is a near pick'em right now. Adesanya is a very slight favorite, but I've seen a lot of action on both sides. Curious who you think will come home with the belt on Saturday evening. All right, let's get into it with my cash game play of the week. I'm going to use Casey O'Neill at 7.6K. All right, I like O'Neill in cash games this week. And for the record, I think cash is kind of difficult this week, so I haven't fully decided on one lineup. There's kind of a lot of different ways to go. Part of it is the salary with the elite favorites at the top makes it difficult to pay up for anyone else. But ultimately, O'Neill is one of the best values on the card, and that's why she's in consideration for me. She's plus 119 to win at 7.6K, and there is not a lot of win equity below the mid-range. I think du Plessis will be popular, 7.9K. But, once you get down into the mid to low sevens, you're talking big underdogs, and Tuivasa and Aguilar, and then Jing Liang, huge underdog, Hooker, huge underdog. Burns and Reyes are, almost have no win equity at all. So 7.6K for O'Neill, who's plus 119 to win, feels pretty reasonable, especially considering she fights at a high pace. She lands a lot of strikes per minute, 8.41 significant strikes landed per minute. She can also wrestle. I don't think it's the easiest matchup for her in the world, and she could definitely lose it, but, you can play Luana Santos in tournaments if you want. I think Luana Santos is fine, given her grappling upside. Santos is overpriced at 8.6K and not really in consideration for cash games for me. O'Neill still very much in consideration, considering her win equity, the value at the price, and her ability to produce offense in multiple realms. And Santos has taken this fight on short notice, where O'Neill probably already had the cardio advantage, already had the pacing advantage over 15 minutes. There's definitely a path where O'Neill can survive some grappling exchanges early and just outpace Santos over the duration. Viable underdog upset there, good price, and I think she's a strong play in cash games this week. All right, my tournament play of the week. I am going to roll with, I'm going to give you a pure contrarian target here. So this is not a fighter who I love. This is not a fighter who I'll be extremely heavy on. But I do think this is an interesting contrarian target, and the person is Josh Culibao at 8.5K. Culibao is not really an exciting fighter. He doesn't really score a lot of points. He doesn't really produce a lot of offense. He's really limited in that sense, and I don't really ever target him. He only lands 3.2 significant strikes per minute, and he doesn't grapple. And odds are he's not going to win this fight convincingly, and he's not going to score very well when he does win. In his 3 UFC wins, 58, 76, and 77. So at 8.5K, it's not extremely likely at all that Culibao smashes and ends up optimal, and that's why I'm sort of categorizing it as a full-on contrarian play. But at the same time, Culibao is probably going to be the lowest owned fighter, excluding Li Jingliang, maybe not even, at 7K and the 6Ks. I think Culibao will be one of the lowest owned fighters on this slate. Why I think he's an interesting contrarian target is because he's facing an opponent in Ricardo Ramos who tends to quit. And Ramos is talented. Ramos is well-rounded. He's got flashy technique on the feet. He's a good submission grappler. But this has been a trend throughout his career. And Ricardo Ramos, being a grappling specialist, has now been guillotined in round 1 twice in a row. And in his other 3 losses in the UFC, he was knocked out in round 1 in 2 of them. So Ramos has lost in round 1 in 4 of his 5 losses in the UFC. And that's not to say Culibao is guaranteed to win by knockout early or anything like that, and that's not the outcome I'm predicting. But, man, now he's flying over to Australia. I don't know. It's hard for me to be fully confident in Ramos, especially if he's taking any damage or facing any adversity at all. Culibao actually, surprisingly, but despite him not rating out well and historically and not being a great finisher, He's actually plus 175 to win inside the distance, which is not a bad line. Is one of the better lines in this range, actually. It's better than, Luana Santos. It's better than Israel Adesanya. So, again, I'm not going to be very high on Culibao, but the Tafa Walker fight, which we'll talk about, a great fight, an obvious fight. The main event's there. Santos O'Neill will be popular. Son Kenan, Ricky Glenn will be popular. There just aren't many places to differentiate yourself, and I think this is one of them, and this is one of them that could, in theory, hit. It's sort of narrative-based, but look, the dirt is in the details. Ramos has been finished in round 1. Almost every time when he loses in his UFC career, he's the underdog here. Coulibao's going to be low-owned. Very interesting contrarian target for me there at 8.5K. All right, next up, my salary play of the week. I'm taking another long shot here, and I'm going to roll with Dan Hooker at 6.9K. It's not a contrarian target, but it is a punt. This is not a fighter that I think will win or that I want heavy exposure to. And in fact, Hooker has a really low floor because he's fighting Mateus Gamrot, who will probably just take him down and hold him down and maybe submit him. So there's no reason to be exceptionally excited by Dan Hooker. But we need salary savings on this card, and so I'm more inclined to look into this range than I might normally be because we're lacking win equity through much of the dogs. And Mateus Gamrot, despite having a pretty sublime record, has been quite shaky on a number of occasions. He's actually been knocked down in 4 of his 9 UFC fights, and not only has he never been knocked out, but he's won 2 of those 4 fights. So it just smells and screams regression to me. A fighter's getting knocked down almost every other fight, and they're rarely losing, let alone getting knocked out. I don't think that's likely to continue. But the fact that he's getting hurt so often is a concern. Feels like it could be predictive. And now he's fighting an opponent in Dan Hooker, who, yeah, he can take down, but if the fight plays out in the feet, or even if it extends into the later rounds, I think Hooker has some damage upside. Hooker's a superior striker, a lengthy striker, and has been in a lot of wars. And Hooker can wear you down and knock you out. And again, I'm not picking Hooker to win, but I think there's sneaky knockout upside from Hooker. He's going to be low-owned, 6.9K. He's going to be facing one of the more popular fighters on the entire slate in Gamrot, so there's leverage there. Again, Hooker doesn't rate out well, plus 525 to win inside the distance, but if you need a punt, I think Hooker is viable, sneaky KO equity, and I wouldn't mind being a little bit overweight to the field on him, 6.9K. All right, and finally, the matchup of the week. I referenced it earlier. It's going to be our mid-range matchup with Junior Tafa and Walter Walker. Tafa's 8.2K, Walker's 8K. Tafa's a slight favorite at minus 127. Walker, the underdog, plus 110. The fight's only minus 210 inside the distance, but it's pretty binary in my opinion, where Tafa's a former glory kickboxer. He excels on the feet. That he's an aggressive fighter. Most of his wins come by round 1 KO, where Walter Walker is a wrestler and somewhat of a liability on the feet, somewhat of a liability in extended fights, and those liabilities forced him to lose, contributed to him losing his UFC debut as a big favorite against Lukasz Brzeski. In this matchup, though, Walker's not 9.4K. He's 8K, and now he's fighting an opponent in Justin Tafa who really cannot get up from takedowns. And we've seen this on the regional scene. We've seen this multiple times in the UFC. Tafa doesn't defend takedowns very well, and he doesn't really get up from takedowns when he's taken down. So it seems pretty obvious that Walker shouldn't stand and strike with Tafa. I expect him to wrestle, unless the UFC's gotten in his ear and told him that they'll cut him if he does. But I think Walker's going to wrestle, and I think if he does, he's going to earn takedowns. He's going to earn a lot of control, and I think he has, maybe not sneaky, but I think he has underrated finishing upside, plus 285 to win inside the distance. He would have scored 85, 86, even in a tight decision win in that UFC debut. At 8K, there's some viability there, and obviously that was in a tight decision. So I think he has pretty significant upside there at 8K. I really like Walker this week. Tafa, I'm a little more hesitant on because he could get taken down and held down early, and that could limit his ceiling, but he also has plenty of knockout upside. If the fight plays out in the feet, I think he's going to have a legit chance to knock Walker out. And at 8.2K, plus 110 inside the distance, he's going to rate out very well for upside purposes too. That's going to do it for this week's UFC Quick Picks. Thank you so much for the support. You can follow me on Twitter, Appley, _T_P, EstablishTheRun.com for all your DraftKings breakdowns needs. Just finished a 2-hour premium podcast with my boy Gordo Gambles, breaking down every single fight on the slate. We got rankings, projections, all that good stuff, all the information you need for UFC 305. Again, EstablishTheRun.com. Really appreciate your support. Best of luck this week. Take care. We'll talk to y'all soon. Peace.